June 4, 1942, at 10:52 a.m. A Japanese carrier intercepted a transmission indicating that an enemy vessel was located 150 miles northwest of Midway Island. Lieutenant Michio Kobayashi's hands shook as he meticulously plotted the coordinates on his navigation chart, unable to comprehend what they represented. From his position in the ready room porthole, he observed Admiral Yamaguchi Tamon examining reconnaissance photographs with a look of utter disbelief, rather than anger or bewilderment. It was becoming clear that something had gone terribly wrong. "We confirmed her sinking at Coral Sea," the admiral murmured to himself, recalling the scene where an American carrier was seen burning and abandoned, listing heavily in the water. Yet the photograph clearly showed an unmistakable American carrier launching aircraft with its distinctive island structure visible through the grainy image. It was evident that there were 3 carriers present, not just 2 as previously thought. The confidence of a decisive victory based on 4 Japanese carriers against 2 American counterparts had suddenly crumbled. Just 27 days prior in the Coral Sea battle, Japanese pilots had left this carrier severely damaged and sinking, emitting thick plumes of smoke and oil into the water. Admiral Takagi had reported to Tokyo that the Yorktown-class carrier was destroyed. The Naval General Staff had removed her from their calculations. However, here she was, USS Yorktown, fully operational and launching aircraft on a direct path towards the Japanese fleet. Over the intercom system, Kobayashi could hear the chaos spreading rapidly through Horyu's crew, as they realized that 3 carriers meant 230 American aircraft, instead of the expected 150. With this new information, it was evident that the ambush had been turned against them, and the implications were dire. Imperial Navy intelligence had grossly underestimated American repair capabilities, leading to a paradoxical situation. The site of Yorktown at Midway contradicted the Japanese belief in industrial limitations. According to their calculations, repairing battle damage required meticulous work over several months and exceptional craftsmanship. A carrier with a 551-pound bomb hole through 5 decks and ruptured fuel tanks would need a minimum of 90 days in a top naval yard for repairs. This conclusion was mathematically sound. At the time, only Enterprise and Hornet were operational American carriers in the Pacific. Lexington had sunk during the Battle of the Coral Sea, while Saratoga was still under repair from torpedo damage. The new Essex-class carriers wouldn't be ready until 1943. Despite Japanese intelligence repeatedly confirming this information, the reality on May 8, 1942, proved otherwise. SBD Dauntless dive bombers shattered their assumptions. During Operation MI, Admiral Nagumo's staff recalculated frantically, as they realized their plans were based on an incorrect assumption about American capabilities. The Battle of the Coral Sea showcased this before Yorktown's miraculous reappearance at Midway. On May 8, 1942, near Australia, a Japanese strike from Shikaku and Zuikaku had targeted USS Yorktown after spotting her emerging from a rain squall. Lieutenant Commander Kakuichi Takahashi led the attack with 18 Type 99 dive bombers. His pilots successfully hit Yorktown near its island structure. A 250-kilogram bomb penetrated the flight deck and detonated 5 decks below, visible even from 10,000 feet. Smoke billowed out of holes in her side as she trailed an oil slick over 10 miles long. Her speed dropped to what Japanese observers estimated at 6 knots. Despite these apparent damages, aircraft returning to the Japanese carriers reported that Yorktown was still afloat, but listing severely enough to make recovery operations impossible. Images revealed destroyers initiating rescue missions. Admiral Takagi Takyo contacted fleet headquarters via radio. Reports confirmed that 2 American aircraft carriers were destroyed. Yorktown and Lexington had been eliminated. the Emperor was notified of the developments. Naval strategists in Coral struck Yorktown from their battle plans, considering her no longer part of their operational forces for the Midway operation. Meanwhile, Captain Elliot Buckmaster, who commanded Yorktown, had different intentions. Despite sustaining severe damage, killing 66 crew members instantly and destroying 6 compartments, the ship continued to sail at a speed of 20 knots instead of the reported 6 knots by Japanese observers. Miraculous efforts were underway below deck as damage control teams worked tirelessly on repairs. A direct hit from an explosive had critically damaged elevator machinery, ruptured fuel tanks over a length of 30 frames, and rendered 6 compartments unusable. Under normal naval standards, such extensive damage would have required months in dry dock for repair. However, the journey from Coral to Pearl Harbor, spanning 33 miles between May 8th and 27th, 1942, showcased a unique American approach to problem-solving. Despite her severe injuries, Yorktown's crew embraced an unconventional mindset. Functionality over aesthetics, speed over perfection, readiness to fight above all else. Chief Carpenter Boyd Mackenzie disregarded traditional damage control protocols by employing quick fixes rather than meticulous repairs. He welded steel plates directly onto damaged structural beams instead of replacing them entirely. Similarly, engineers in the machinery spaces faced significant challenges. Destroyed elevator machinery and compromised boiler rooms. But they innovated by repurposing parts from other sections of the ship and fabricating new components using available materials, demonstrating a resourcefulness that was alien to Japanese naval philosophy. Despite suffering damage that should have restricted her to a maximum speed of 12 knots, Yorktown managed to maintain a steady pace of 20 knots. American submarines relayed this information back to Pearl Harbor. Japanese intelligence intercepted these coded messages, but misinterpreted them based on their own assessment criteria, assuming the damaged vessel could only travel at 5 to 8 knots. They concluded that Yorktown would not arrive in Pearl Harbor until mid-June, far too late for any necessary repairs before the scheduled June 4th Midway operation. On May 27, 1942, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Pearl Harbor witnessed an extraordinary event as Yorktown limped into its naval base. The ship's arrival was a sobering sight. A 10-mile-long oil slick stretched from Diamond Head to the harbor entrance, and smoke could be seen seeping through makeshift repairs. Rear Admiral Aubrey Fitch had personally assessed the damage and concluded that it would take at least 90 days to return Yorktown to battle readiness. However, Pearl Harbor in May 1942 was no longer a peacetime naval station, but an unprecedented forward repair base operating on the edge of possibility. The salvaging efforts following December 7th had fostered a workforce accustomed to thinking and working in hours rather than months. Upon Yorktown's arrival, Admiral Chester Nimitz personally inspected the damage while standing waist-deep in dry dock number 1, his pants soaked with oil and hands smeared black from the ship's repairs. Addressing Captain Claude Gillette, the yard superintendent and Lieutenant Commander H.J. Fingstarg, the hull repair expert, Nimitz declared firmly, "We must get this ship back into service within 3 days." The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Fingstarg gulped and responded with a resolute nod. "Yes, sir." Station Hypo's intelligence mission was not arbitrary. It had a strict 3-day deadline. Commander Joseph Rochfort at Station Hypo had successfully deciphered JN 25, Japan's Naval Operations Code, located in Building 1 just 400 yards from the dry dock. This breakthrough revealed that AF indicated Midway and provided details about the attack date on June 4th. Additionally, they learned that 4 carriers of the 1st Air Fleet were involved. Most critically, the Japanese believed they would only face the USS Enterprise and the USS Hornet, assuming that the USS Yorktown was out of commission. This intelligence shifted the urgency of repairing the Yorktown from urgent to absolutely crucial. Without her, Americans would be outnumbered 4-2, while having her in action reduced the odds to 3-4, still unfavorable but more manageable. On May 28th at 5:30 a.m., Dry Dock Number 1 was bustling with activity as workers rushed aboard the Yorktown even before the water had fully drained, leaving ankle-deep swirls. Over 1,400 individuals from various base shops, welders, electricians, shipfitters, machinists, pipefitters, and sheet metal workers, had been working through the night on other ships and continued without rest for 3 days straight. This repair effort contradicted Japanese industrial methodology. Instead of meticulous planning and hierarchical approval processes, work was conducted as a well-coordinated chaos, with supervisors making immediate decisions. Workers transcended trade barriers. The solitary rule compelled her to contest it vigorously. These particular methods would have appalled Japanese naval engineers. The explosive devastation caused by the bomb. A 551-pound bomb had wrought havoc from the flight deck down through 5 levels. According to Japanese doctrine, damaged steel needed to be cut away and replacement sections fabricated before rebuilding each deck. This process was estimated to take 30 days. In contrast, Pearl Harbor's approach involved leaving the damaged structure intact while welding large plates over it and reinforcing weak areas with wooden beams sourced from construction sites. This solution took just 18 hours. The near misses involving fuel tanks ruptured storage along 30 frames, contaminating fuel supplies. Japanese protocol dictated draining, cleaning, inspecting, and individually repairing these tanks, which would have taken 2 weeks. In contrast, the American approach involved pumping out contaminated fuel, sealing leaks with quick-hardening cement designed for runway repairs, welding plates over everything, and completely sealing off any tanks deemed too damaged for immediate repair. This method required only 11 hours. Regarding machinery, 3 boiler rooms were compromised, reducing superheat capacity by 70% and limiting the maximum speed to 27 knots instead of 32.5. Japanese standards called for a complete replacement. However, Pearl Harbor's strategy was to disregard the superheaters altogether, accept the reduced speed, and concentrate on restoring basic functionality. This approach took just 14 hours. Electrician Lewis Walters, aged 21 at the time, later recounted that there was no room for thorough repairs. Instead of running cables through conduits, they were laid across decks, and damaged sections were patched with welded steel plates rather than replaced entirely. Everything was done hastily and unsightly, but functional. The repair process involved welding over 20 tons of steel plate, stringing approximately 35 miles of electrical cable, pumping out nearly 400 tons of contaminated fuel, sealing off 3 destroyed compartments, and continuous arc welding that led to rolling blackouts across Oahu. Workers ate while working and took brief naps against bulkheads. When the heavy demand for electricity caused hospitals to lose power, civilians in Oahu accepted the disruptions without complaint. Construction companies provided lumber to the shipyard without formal documentation when needed. The hull repairs defied conventional naval architecture principles. Ruptured seams were filled with wood, covered by steel plates and welded securely, forming what one engineer described as a makeshift metal patch. Electrical work was carried out in disregard of proper procedures. Cables were run along decks through hatches and across ceilings. On May 30, 1942, at 9 a.m., the USS Yorktown departed with shipyard workers still on board, continuing repairs even as she increased speed. These workers would disembark once the vessel had cleared the harbor. The air group assembled on her flight deck was a testament to ingenuity and adaptability. Bombing Squadron 3 from the USS Saratoga, Torpedo Squadron 3 pieced together from survivors, and Fighting Squadron 3 comprised of pilots from 3 different squadrons who had never worked together before. As Yorktown left Pearl Harbor, the workers responsible for these extraordinary repairs lined the docks to watch her go. Chief hull technician Pfingstug would later remark that they sent her out looking like a fighter patched up between rounds. She may not have been pretty, but she could still deliver blows. The Point Luck rendezvous took place on June 2, 1942, approximately 325 miles northeast of Midway. When Yorktown arrived at Point Luck to join Enterprise and Hornet, the crews aboard the other ships were astonished. Commander Wade McCluskey, who led Enterprise's air group, later noted in his writings that they knew Yorktown was damaged after Coral Sea, but anticipated her arrival as a reserve carrier. Instead, she appeared fully operational, launching aircraft and conducting flight operations like any combat-ready vessel. Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, who commanded from Yorktown, recognized the significance of this development. The presence of the third carrier wasn't merely about increasing aerial forces. It was about undermining Japanese confidence and altering their strategic calculus. During his final briefing to his staff, Fletcher stated that the Japanese had meticulously planned this operation for months, considering every detail with the assumption they would face only 2 carriers. When our aircraft appeared over them, he said, any certainty they felt would evaporate. Admiral Nagumo aboard Akagi conducted final preparations with unwavering confidence. His fleet comprised 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Huryu, with a total of 248 aircraft, compared to the Americans' 2 carriers and their 150 aircraft. Japanese pilots, veterans from Pearl Harbor, were pitted against American crews who had yet to win a carrier battle. Captain Minoru Genda, Nagumo's air operations officer, had meticulously wargamed every possible scenario. Even if the Americans achieved surprise, he believed that Japan's pilot superiority and numerical advantage would ensure victory. The only variable that could shift the balance was the presence of a third American carrier, which intelligence indicated was impossible due to Yorktown being presumed lost. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who had led the attack on Pearl Harbor but was sidelined by appendicitis, observed the preparations from his sickbed. Years later, he would write that their entire plan rested on the assumption that there were only 2 American carriers. Exactly 2, neither approximately 2 nor possibly 3. If this was incorrect, everything would be off. June 4th marked the shattering at 4:30 a.m., when Japanese carriers launched 108 aircraft to attack Midway. The day began as planned. Nagumo kept 108 reserve aircraft on standby for an anticipated single American carrier, confident in his strategic trap. At 7:10 a.m., a scout plane reported sighting an American carrier, leading Nagumo to rearm his reserves with torpedoes intended for ship attacks. Shortly after, confusion arose when the same scout reported that there were actually 2 carriers present, but still within calculation limits. At 8:20 a.m., Lieutenant Commander John Waldron led 8 TBD torpedo bombers from the Hornet in an assault on the Japanese fleet, lacking fighter escort. All 15 aircraft were shot down, with only George Gay surviving. Despite this sacrifice, it forced the defending fighters to descend to sea level. 10 minutes later, Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise launched a 10-plane attack, though again, no hits were scored and many planes were lost. At 9:15 a.m., 3 TBDs from Yorktown initiated another assault, just as 12 more TBDs began their runs. Japanese lookouts counted the incoming aircraft and realized there were too many for 2 carriers. The mathematical expectation was wrong. There were indeed 3 American carriers. On the Huryu's bridge, Admiral Yamaguchi quickly recalculated his strategy in response to this revelation. 3 carriers altered the course of events. But before new orders could be issued or adjustments made by the Japanese, dive bombers arrived at 10:22 a.m. Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie, leading Yorktown's bombing Squadron 3, had initially become disoriented, but discovered the enemy fleet by tracking a destroyer's wake. His 17 SBD Dauntless aircraft reached their targets simultaneously with Enterprise's squadrons, coincidentally due to Yorktown's delayed launch caused by damaged boilers. From an altitude of 14,000 feet, Leslie observed 4 Japanese carriers with flight decks brimming with armed and fueled planes, escorted by a low-level combat air patrol. In just 6 minutes, 3 of those carriers were ablaze. Saw-U, struck by 3 bombs from Leslie's squadron, erupted into flames visible for miles. The Japanese responded aggressively but in vain, targeting what they believed to be a ghost carrier. Admiral Yamaguchi aboard Hiryu faced insurmountable odds against the trio of American carriers. He launched 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters towards Yorktown, his sole remaining target. As the strike closed in, Lieutenant Michio Kobayashi scrutinized the carrier through binoculars and realized it was indeed Yorktown, thought to have been destroyed at Coral Sea. At 12:05 p.m., 3 bombs hit Yorktown, igniting fires and rupturing steam lines. The ship appeared lifeless amidst the flames. For a second time in 27 days, Japanese pilots left Yorktown seemingly defeated. Yet even as she burned, Yorktown had already turned the tide. Her morning attack on Saw-U had proven fatal to that carrier, while her absorption of Hiryu's assault shielded Enterprise and Hornet from harm until they could launch their counterstrike against Hiryu 4 hours later. Captain Buckmaster ordered a damage assessment following an intense firefight, which revealed that Yorktown's hasty repairs from Pearl Harbor were holding strong despite their unsightly nature. The welded plates remained intact. Chief Engineer John F. Delaney informed that despite the damage from Japanese bombs, the repairs made during Pearl Harbor were sound and would hold. He requested 2 hours for further assessment. Within an hour, 3 boilers had been reignited, fires contained, and counterflooding measures reduced the list to starboard. By 14 p.m., Yorktown was making 19 knots, refueling its fighters, appearing so well restored that when Hiryu's second wave arrived at 23 p.m., the pilots mistook it for a different undamaged carrier. This confusion led Lieutenant Tominaga Joichi, heading 5 torpedo bombers, Hiryoru's last remaining strike force, to report back to his base, suggesting they were attacking not 1 but 2 American carriers. The Japanese High Command, perplexed by this report, failed to coordinate an effective response before Enterprise's dive bombers found and destroyed Hiryu at 17 p.m. The decisive blow. On June 6th, at 13:15 p.m., Lieutenant Commander Jahachi Tanabe of the Japanese submarine Eminis 168 discovered Yorktown being towed by American vessels. He fired 4 torpedoes. 2 struck Yorktown, while 1 hit the escorting destroyer USS Hammond. On June 7th, as Yorktown capsized and sank, Tanabe noted in his logbook, "Sunk an American carrier, likely the Saratoga." Even after its sinking, Yorktown's identity remained a mystery to the Japanese forces, who never fully comprehended that the carrier they believed to be at Midway was the same one they had thought they sunk during the Battle of the Coral Sea. The figures tell the truth. Yorktown's repairs were estimated by the Japanese to take between 90 to 120 days under similar circumstances. During peacetime, the standard duration for such operations is between 30 to 45 days. However, in this case, it took only 72 hours with continuous effort from approximately 1,400 workers. The combat effectiveness reached was 85%. The battle's outcome surpassed initial expectations. Japanese strategists assumed that 4 carriers against 2 would guarantee victory. In reality, the confrontation involved 4 Japanese carriers facing 3 American ones, creating a roughly balanced situation. As a result, 4 Japanese carriers were sunk compared to 1 American carrier lost. Strategically, the presence of the Yorktown altered the course of events. The expectation was for the Yorktown to be decisively defeated by enemy aircraft. However, it absorbed 2 strikes that would otherwise have targeted the Enterprise or the Hornet. A total of 75 Japanese planes were destroyed during attacks on the Yorktown, marking a significant blow to Japan's offensive capabilities. Years later, those involved would contemplate the significance of the Yorktown's participation in the battle. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida of Japan recalled that the appearance of a 3rd carrier disrupted their plans entirely. Every assumption and scenario they had considered was based on the premise of 2 carriers. When lookouts reported an unusually high number of torpedo planes, it became clear something was awry. By the time they grasped the situation fully, 3 carriers were already ablaze. Aviation machinist Tom Cheek aboard the USS Enterprise also provided insight into the battle's dynamics. The sight of the USS Yorktown at Pearl Harbor left grown men cheering with genuine excitement. Although everyone knew she had sustained significant damage during the Battle of Coral Sea, there she stood, patched up like a boxer ready for another bout. Electrician Wayne Morrison from Pearl Harbor summed it up perfectly. When we learned that the Yorktown had managed to sink 3 Japanese carriers before sustaining hits herself, the entire shipyard fell silent in awe. Soon after, someone began clapping, and within minutes, 10,000 workers were joining in. Those critical days mattered immensely. The Japanese gradually came to grasp the gravity of what had transpired, but it took years for full comprehension to set in. Admiral Yamamoto's chief of staff, Matomi Ugaki, recorded his thoughts in his diary. He wrote that the Yorktown's appearance at Midway was no mere coincidence. It was the result of preparation and intelligence gathering. The 3-day repair was not a miraculous feat, but rather a well-coordinated response to strategic information. In 1962, Lieutenant Commander Tanabe visited Pearl Harbor. After standing silently for several minutes in front of dry dock number 1 where Yorktown had been repaired, he remarked, "Now I understand. We were up against more than just another nation. We faced an ideology that believed anything is possible through relentless effort and dedication. They held steadfast to the idea that spirit triumphs over mere material resources. Americans held firm in their belief that resources should be used wisely." In his memoirs, Admiral Shigeru Fukudome reflected on this sentiment. The repair of the USS Yorktown demonstrated that the war was lost even before it had truly started. A country capable of fixing extensive damage within just 3 days would likely outperform any nation requiring 3 months to accomplish similar repairs. This difference lay in strategic thinking and philosophy. The methods employed to mend the Yorktown highlighted fundamental distinctions in approach. While Japan emphasized perfection, craftsmanship, and meticulous detail, America focused on functionality, speed, and adaptability. For Japan, restoring a damaged vessel meant ensuring it was pristine once again. For the United States, the priority was getting ships back into battle quickly, regardless of their cosmetic condition. This contrast went beyond ship repairs alone. Japanese aircraft were renowned for their exquisite design and meticulous craftsmanship, whereas American planes, though perhaps not as flawless, were produced in vast quantities with parts that could be easily interchanged and repaired using whatever materials were available. This practical approach often translated into a decisive advantage on the battlefield. The urgency of repairing the Yorktown was compounded by intelligence breakthroughs, which made it imperative to get the ship back into service promptly. Without the Yorktown's timely repair, Admiral Fletcher might not have ventured into battle. However, with her restored and operational, the risks seemed more manageable, thus tipping the scales in favor of engagement. Commander Rochfort later remarked that while they could read enemy mail, It was futile if they couldn't take action. It was the repair of the Yorktown that provided them with the capability to act. The shipyard workers were just as crucial as any codebreaker. Yorktown's restoration revolutionized naval damage control doctrine and made speed more important than perfection. Functionality took precedence over aesthetics, and innovation surpassed protocol. This became known as the Yorktown Standard. Any vessel could be salvaged given the right efforts. This repair showcased America's industrial prowess to the world. Workers who restored Yorktown in 72 hours were emblematic of those who would build Liberty ships in just 4 days, B-24 bombers within 63 minutes, and ultimately the atomic bomb in 3 years. Post-war recognition came in 1985 when Pearl Harbor survivors met with Yorktown veterans for a reunion ceremony in Hawaii. Electrician Lewis Walters, who had worked tirelessly stringing cables over those 72 hours, was introduced to gunner Tom Lee. "Your wiring saved my life," Lee said, explaining how the primary power failed upon the first bomb hit, but the backup cables ensured his guns continued firing. Walters replied, "We knew boys would rely on our work. Every weld, every wire, and each patch we created was imagined to support someone's son in need." Admiral Nimitz later provided a definitive evaluation, stating that the 3 days Yorktown spent in dry dock were arguably the most crucial days of the Pacific War. While the repair itself was indeed impressive, it was what it symbolized that truly mattered. A united America with its democracy intact, workers dedicated to the cause, and industry operating at full capacity. The Japanese expected to face an America they perceived as sluggish, complacent, and fragmented. Instead, they encountered a swift, resilient, and cohesive nation. Yorktown's resurrection was evidence of this transformation. A ship thought to be crippled reappeared fully operational. When Japanese pilots saw Yorktown's aircraft over their carriers, they witnessed not just planes but the embodiment of American resolve. They were witnessing the future, a world where industrial prowess and unwavering determination could surmount any obstacle. The workers who restored Yorktown did more than fix a ship. They showcased a national spirit that would be crucial in winning the war. In those 3 days, Pearl Harbor's workforce demonstrated that in America, impossible simply means it hasn't been achieved yet. This is reflected in the final tally: 72 hours of labor by 1,400 workers and $2.2 million worth of materials invested. During this period, they halted other projects. The outcome: 1 Japanese carrier sunk definitively by Yorktown's aircraft, 2 waves of attacks absorbed, 322 enemy aircraft destroyed in battle, and 357 Japanese personnel lost. Japanese offensive capabilities were permanently halted. This demonstrated that American repair efficiency surpassed Japanese expectations by an astounding 3,000%, validating their rapid repair strategy. New damage control standards emerged as a result, inspiring accelerated production across all sectors of American industry. The lingering question remained: how did the Americans know to fix the Yorktown so swiftly? And how could they have predicted the exact date, June 4th, that Midway would take place? The truth was that American codebreakers had been deciphering Japanese communications in real time, a fact that wouldn't be revealed for many years. Yet even without this knowledge, the timely arrival of the Yorktown should have been a clear indication to the Japanese that their plans were compromised. The enduring lesson from this event is still taught today within the U.S. Navy. Speed is more crucial than perfection, and adaptability trumps meticulous planning in warfare. Contemporary damage control doctrine emphasizes rapid restoration over complete repair, a principle directly derived from the Yorktown's quick turnaround in dry dock. Every sailor is familiar with this story, and every damage controlman adheres to these established standards. Captain Buckmaster's summary of the situation encapsulates the essence of what happened. The Japanese anticipated us adhering to their regulations regarding repair timelines. However, we are Americans, and our approach is different. We create rules on the spot. Our objective was straightforward. Yorktown would participate in the Battle of Midway. The efforts at Pearl Harbor weren't a miracle, but an embodiment of American industrial democracy, a chaotic yet relentless endeavor. They repaired my ship using any means necessary, even if it wasn't neat or conventional. What mattered was readiness. When we set sail on May 30, Yorktown had transformed since the Coral Sea battle. She was no longer the same vessel, but a blend of original components and improvisations, fueled by determination. Like America itself, damaged yet undeterred, patched yet unbroken, Yorktown stood ready to engage in combat. At Midway, the Japanese faced not just 3 carriers, but an embodiment of American resolve forged into steel. This spirit emerged from 72 hours spent in a dry dock where the impossible became reality. The story encapsulates these crucial days and culminates with the USS Yorktown resting at a depth of 16,650 feet beneath the Pacific Ocean. Discovered by Robert Ballard in 1998. She sits upright, her battle scars still visible. The damage from Pearl Harbor is evident. Welded plates and patched holes serve as a reminder of her quick repairs before Midway. At Dry Dock Number 1 in Pearl Harbor, there's a plaque commemorating the extraordinary feat of American workers who repaired the USS Yorktown within 72 hours to prepare for the Battle of Midway. Their efforts transformed history. The Japanese had roused a sleeping giant at Pearl Harbor, but at Midway, they encountered the full power of that awakened force. Lieutenant Commander Tanabe, responsible for delivering what he believed was the fatal blow to the Yorktown, came to understand too late the true nature of his adversary, an unyielding spirit that refused to accept impossibility. What we thought were mere ships and planes, it turned out, were fighting against a concept that America would never admit defeat. The workers who accomplished this miraculous feat remained largely unknown. There were no medals for welding, no accolades for laying cables, and no recognition for patching steel plates. They returned to their tasks, continuing to repair other vessels and contributing to the war effort with each successful fix. Yet, those 72 hours altered history, demonstrating that improving the Yorktown in such a short time frame was proof of America's capacity to achieve the impossible. Sending a hastily repaired carrier to Midway sent a message to the world. American industrial might wasn't just about production. It was also about resilience, ingenuity, and an unwavering determination not to be defeated. The appearance of the Yorktown at Midway served as more than tactical surprise. It was evidence that in America's arsenal of democracy, the most potent weapon was its refusal to accept limitations. In just 3 days, an American welder with a torch accomplished what many thought was impossible. This tale of the USS Yorktown's miraculous comeback serves as a testament to what people can achieve when they unite around a shared goal. Over the course of 72 hours, these workers did more than fix a ship. They showcased that perseverance and creativity could conquer any obstacle. They demonstrated that functionality took precedence over aesthetics, and that future battles were more critical than past protocols. Japanese commanders who marveled at Yorktown's presence during the Battle of Midway saw not just a repaired vessel, but also a glimpse into the future. A world where industrial democracy would outshine military aristocracy, where flexible problem-solving would triumph over rigid adherence to rules. The ship sank on June 7, 1942, yet what it symbolized emerged from those waters and influenced the rest of World War II. Each rapid repair, each daunting deadline met, And every issue resolved through ingenuity rather than strict procedure all stemmed from those pivotal days in May when over 1,000 American workers demonstrated that impossible was merely a starting point. The ghost ship that puzzled Japanese pilots wasn't mystical, but a testament to the power of collective effort. These workers were unaware they were making history. Their sole focus was on completing the task within 3 days. In those crucial days, they didn't just mend a carrier. They established a principle essential for America's success throughout the war and beyond. Free individuals collaborating towards a common goal can accomplish anything. This philosophy, embodied in steel and dispatched to sea, played a significant role in altering history at Midway. It remains America's secret weapon, a belief that any challenge can be overcome with enough effort, ingenuity, and speed. Not technological superiority or abundant resources, but the conviction that problems can be solved when people work hard and smartly. The Japanese never grasped this until it was too late. They measured time in months while Americans lived by the hour. They sought perfection whereas Americans aimed for victory. While they adhered strictly to protocols, Americans embraced necessity. Ultimately, 3 critical days spent in dry dock decided the Pacific's destiny. These days revealed that the mightiest weapon of the arsenal of democracy was not just weaponry or democratic principles alone, but rather their synthesis. It was free laborers making an impossible choice, and then executing it with determination.